Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon, and we're going to talk about that Chinese ban on video games for minors. If you watched the video we did the other day, China has mandated that if you're under 18 years old, you're only allowed to play video games for 3 hours a week during set hours on weekends, right? They said that video games are a social ill, a societal ill, that video games are responsible for all the decadence, I guess, in China, which is so weird because China is producing an awful lot of video games lately, an awful lot of addictive, free-to-play video games, and now they're saying their own children can't play these games, and the kids are not happy. Teenagers are not happy. So we're going to talk about that. Before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. Over 234,000 subs. Geeky is sitting this video out, but she will be back later today. I think we're going to do a review of Sean. I'm calling him Shang-Chi because they call him Sean in the movie. Shang-Chi. We actually went to go see Shang-Chi yesterday, and it wasn't bad. It actually wasn't bad. I still don't think it's going to perform gangbusters at the box office, given the circumstances and the fact that the character's not really known that well. But, you know, the movie, it wasn't terrible. It really wasn't terrible. So we'll talk about that. I guess that kind of dovetails with China, right? Because Disney created this movie for China, and as it turns out, it's not even opening in China. So go figure. So let's talk about this. If you guys did watch our previous video, or if you've been keeping up on the news, China has decided to regulate gaming for minors. If you're under 18, you're only allowed to play for a couple of hours a week, and the kids are not happy. But yeah, this is interesting. This is coming from Fortune. The headline, China's gaming market was built on free and addictive games. Can Beijing stop kids from playing them? Good question, because everybody jokes about freemium games, pay-to-win games, and a lot of those games do come from Chinese companies like Tencent. And Tencent stock, I guess, has dropped off a cliff because of this. But this is coming from Comic Book Resources. And I had CCG, I think, sent to me the other day that Chinese teens are pushing back against the restrictive gaming regulations as China imposes even greater restrictions on the gaming habits of minors in the country. Unhappy teenagers are pushing back against the law. Breaking the law, breaking the law. A change to the law in China has caused a backlash from Chinese teens following new regulations that will restrict the number of gaming hours permitted to children under 18 years old. The regulation and subsequent outcry from young Chinese gamers was reported by Al Jazeera. The new law is set to limit the number of gaming hours to 3 hours per week for anyone younger than 18. Specifically, gaming services will only be made available to minors between 8 and 9 p.m. on Fridays and weekends, in addition to any public holidays. The change follows pre-existing regulations introduced in 2019 that limited gaming hours to a mere 90 minutes per day. Before 10 and 8 a.m., they had a curfew. Not still better than 3 hours a week, right? Young gamers voiced their outrage online, decrying the regulation as unfair and inconsiderate of the modern gaming culture. One teen noted the law could limit the Chinese esports scene. That's true. The youth wrote on the Chinese microblogging site Weibo. Is it Weibo? It's like their version of Twitter and Facebook. This group of grandfathers and uncles who make these rules and regulations. Have you ever played games? Do you understand that the best age for esports players is in their teens? It was also claimed that the ruling was hypocritical when compared to various other laws around minors. They wrote sexual consent at 14. At 16, you can go out to work, but you have to be 18 to play video games. This is a joke. Yeah, I joke with Squid King. It's so funny. It's like you can drive a car at 16, potentially get yourself killed or kill somebody. You're considered legally an adult at 18. You can vote. You can vote for the leader of your country, but you can't have a drink until you're 21. You can't buy stock, I guess, until you're 21. I don't understand it. It's very random. The regulations were introduced due to the government's consensus that gamers posed a risk of addiction. It was determined that gaming interfered with the teenagers' mental and physical well-being, as well as their studies. Let's go back up here. Age of consent is 14. So teenagers can have sex, but they can't play video games. Well, maybe they're going to have a lot more sex now because they can't play video games. Maybe teen pregnancies are going to go up in China. I don't know. One media outlet, the People's Daily, referred to gaming as spiritual opium. Yet, despite the announcement of the regulations, some have questioned how the government intends to enforce the law, as many have suggested simply using a parent's login as an alternative. They were talking like facial recognition and all this other crazy shit to keep kids from playing video games. You know what? There are people here in the U.S., if they could get away with it, they absolutely would ban you from playing video games. They would want a social credit score to see if you're a toxic gamer or not. Did you tweet something off color? Are you hanging out in the wrong message boards? You know, did you send a private Facebook message that contained a Hitler meme? Then you're not allowed to play video games anymore. We're banning you forever from video games, except for like Tetris and Animal Crossing. You're allowed to play those. We'll change your disposition. We can't have you playing violent video games, because that's awful. So far, the economic impact on the gaming industry has been minor. Companies such as Tencent, the gaming firm responsible for providing such games as PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds in China, did see a fall of roughly 3.6% on Tuesday. The relatively small ramifications at present are due to the fairly limited amount of revenue children actually contribute to the gaming industry. However, Mayo Kato, an analyst who works for Smart Karma, did claim the law would have future ramifications for the industry. He said the problem is that this move destroys the entire habit-forming nature of playing games in early age. So we're not going to sell cigarettes to children anymore, so they're not going to turn into chain-smoking adults, I guess is their way of looking at it. But yeah, Al Jazeera, they've got an article on it. Beijing said they needed to stop the growing addiction to the spiritual opium. So what's going to happen is they're gonna push for other countries to partake in that spiritual opium, aren't they? I mean, China is really pushing into gaming, absolutely, and they're pushing into anime, and they're crossing a lot of that stuff over right now. And look at a lot of the games coming out of China. They're like anime-based, free-to-play, freemium, pay-to-win games, mobile games. And they're just going to push them harder to other countries. Like, their own kids aren't going to be addicted to video games, but they're going to make damn sure that the West is addicted to video games, I guess. So this is even the Washington Post. The Washington Post is like, this isn't about the kids. This is about control. Again, the Washington Post, a very left-leaning news outlet, is like, this is going too far. Too far. Agreeing to censorship in exchange for money is a bad look under any circumstances. As recent developments show, it can turn out to be a bad bargain. The buzzy new front in this great power pop culture war, they're talking about the pop culture war in the Washington Post, is the announcement that the Chinese president, his regime is slapping limits on the time minors can spend playing video games. Supposedly, this is for the children's benefit. But it's really the latest salvo in China's long-running war on gaming, just one front in its efforts to exert social control by regulating pop culture. I'm going to stop right there. Does this sound familiar to anybody who watches this channel? This is coming from the Washington Post. Again, left-leaning outlet, which, if gaming journos took shots at quote-unquote gamer gators, the Washington Post would probably give them high fives for it. Like, yes, get those toxic man babies out of here, get them out of our space, whatever. But they're even saying that this is social control over pop culture, because this is a war on pop culture to gain control over people, coming from the Washington Post. Now, if you think we're being ridiculous sometimes when we talk about different things on the channel, and again, I think sometimes, a lot of things get blown out of proportion, in regards to like agenda in Hollywood or agenda in comics or that sort of thing. But again, look at what China's doing, and look at, Hollywood specifically. Hollywood has been pandering to Chinese audiences for years now. You think some of that might have rubbed off on Hollywood executives, Hollywood studios. Like, yeah, you can use your platform to exert social control over people. I'm really surprised this is coming from the Washington Post. So the government targeted video gaming in 2018 as a public health issue, blaming the pastime for an increase in childhood myopia. The New York Times actually blamed Fortnite for a rise in the alt-right. And multiple times there have been mainstream American media outlets claiming that video games were causing more people to become far-right extremists and all this other stuff. And here we have the Washington Post saying, yeah, this is bad. This is bad to have the government interfere like this and try to censor people and try to control them through pop culture. This is a bad thing. Just remember this the next time, some talk of gamers being toxic or, gaming having to be regulated or whatever comes up, because I'm sure it will. The government, targeted video games in 2018. They limited the hours when children were allowed to play and the money they could spend on microtransactions and banned everyone from using games that included sexual explicitness, goriness, violence, and gambling. All of my favorite things all in one place. No, not really. I play a lot of retro games. More chillingly, the 2019 rules required people to link their gaming handles and real identities, meaning games were no longer safe spaces for unfettered discussions. Again, this sounds an awful lot like you're supporting some of the people here who think that, the media and the government have entirely too much say in the lives of gamers. Better watch yourself, Washington Post. You're gonna wind up on a watch list or something. Some other journos are gonna come after you. It's a complicated environment in which to do business, but companies based in the US and elsewhere have done their best to accommodate China. In 2019, Blizzard banned a prominent Hearthstone player from its esports tournaments for a year for the crime of supporting Hong Kong's protest movement. Yeah, that was definitely a blow to Blizzard. Blizzard's been dead before the current scandal. Speaking of which, they're actually changing the name of McCree, because McCree was named after one of the Blizzard employees who frequented the Cosby Room. And you can get this beautiful, beautiful Halloween costume for a mere $9.97 now. But it might be a collector's item. I don't know what they're going to call him. Johnny Cowboy Man. I don't know what they're going to call McCree after this. But so this is interesting because this sounds an awful lot like things that quote unquote gamergators were saying, that gamers have been demonized, that it's become weirdly political, that it's about social control. I'm just saying it's definitely not something I would have expected from the Washington Post. Not when you're seeing headlines like this in the New York Times that video games are being blamed for the rise in right-wing extremism or whatever. But are we really that far away from China at this point? With a lot of the demonizing of gamers and the demonizing of video games. And it's look, this is going back to the 80s, going back to the 60s. Back in the 60s, 50s, 60s, rock and roll was the devil. And Dungeons and Dragons and heavy metal were the devil. Comic books were the devil. And now it's video games. Video games are the devil. And, mark my words, if we don't watch it, that something like this could happen here. It absolutely could. Because they're already case building. A lot of media outlets, a lot of organizations are already case building as to why gamers are terrible people and video games are awful and video games are too violent and video games create people who do heinous things in public with firearms. That's how I'm going to say it, because I don't know what YouTube's going to allow me to say, right? That they connect all those dots, even if they're not actually connected. And you don't think something like that could happen here? That they could regulate gaming over here? I absolutely think it could happen if we're not careful. Maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but 10 years from now, 5 years from now, it depends. It depends on who's in office and how often gamers are being blamed for all of our societal ills. I think it absolutely could happen here. So be very careful. Be very careful. And you better be careful, Washington Post. You're starting to sound like Gamergate. I'm going to wrap this up. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We'll talk later.